There's a room in Gatwick, England that most people will never hear about. No passengers, no runway, no aircraft. Just a machine that costs tens of millions of dollars bolted to a hydraulic platform, surrounded by screens that stretch in every direction. And on February 19, 2026, that room changed everything for the most delayed commercial aircraft in modern aviation history. This is not a story about a simulator. Not really. This is a story about trust. About what happens when the most powerful aviation company in the world spends 6 years missing its own deadlines and then, quietly, on a Thursday morning, hands regulators the keys to something that actually works. The question is whether anyone still believes them. Let's go back to where this started. Because to understand why February 19th matters, you have to understand what Boeing promised and how long ago. They promised it. The 777X was supposed to be in the air by 2020, not in testing. In service, carrying passengers, Emirates had already started planning routes around it. Lufthansa had built crew schedules, expecting it. Airlines had made billion-dollar bets on a delivery timeline that Boeing had given them with full confidence. Then 2020 came, and the 777X DID in single quotes T. Then 2021, then 2022, then 2023, then 2024, then 22.5.6 years. 6 years of technical setbacks, regulatory scrutiny, pandemic disruptions, and a reputational crisis that shook Boeing to its foundation. And through all of it, 481 orders from 13 of the world's most powerful airlines sat waiting. Emirates alone has 205 aircraft on order. That's not a bet, that's a dependency. But here's what most people covering this story missed entirely. The aircraft still isn't certified. The FAA hasn't signed off on it. The first production flight isn't even expected until April 2026. Deliveries to Lufthansa aren't targeted until early 2027 at the earliest dot. So why does February 19th matter? Why is this the moment that changes the trajectory of the entire program? Because of what a simulator actually is, not a training tool, not a piece of equipment. A simulator is a legal prerequisite. Without a certified simulator, no airline can run a single approved training session. Without approved training, no pilot can be legally qualified to fly the aircraft. Without qualified pilots, no airline can take delivery. Without deliveries, the entire program collapses under the weight of its own timeline. The simulator is the hidden bottleneck that nobody talks about. And for the first time in the history of the 777X program, that bottleneck has been removed. And this is where the story starts to get uncomfortable. Think about what it took to get to this room. In Gatwick, a decade. Not 6 years, a decade. See, the simulator manufacturer Boeing partnered with to describe the qualification as the result of 10 years of innovation and engineering excellence. 10 years of building something that doesn't fly, that will never carry a passenger. That exists entirely to prepare human beings for a machine that itself has spent 6 years being prepared. The FAA and EASA, two of the most demanding regulatory bodies on the planet, both issued qualification certificates simultaneously. That doesn't happen by accident. It requires joint on-site testing, documented evidence of flight dynamic accuracy, environmental modeling, system replication, and a level of fidelity that regulators can independently verify. Boeing and C had to prove, inside that room in Gatwick, that the simulator behaves exactly like the real aircraft. The motion cues, the visual systems, the way the flight deck responds when something goes wrong at 40,000 feet, all of it had to match. And it did. Captain Gary Mandy, Boeing's 777X chief technical pilot, called it an important step. That's the language of someone who has lived inside this program long enough to know that every milestone is fragile. Every approval could be withdrawn. Every timeline could slip. He's not celebrating. He's moving carefully. But here's the detail that tells you everything about how different this aircraft really is. The 777X has a wingspan of 235 feet. That's larger than any commercial aircraft Boeing has ever built. Larger than most airports are designed to accommodate at standard gates. So, Boeing did something that has never been done on a commercial passenger aircraft before. They made the wingtips fold. On the ground, the wingtips fold upward, bringing the total wingspan down to 212 feet, narrow enough to fit standard airport infrastructure. In the air, they extend fully, giving the aircraft the aerodynamic efficiency it needs for routes spanning up to 7,285 nautical miles, and, because this has never been done before, there is a dedicated indicator in the cockpit, a specific control display that tells the pilots at all times whether the wingtips are extended, in motion, or folded. That indicator needs to be in the simulator. Every unusual system, every non-standard procedure, every situation a pilot might face has to be practiced in a certified environment before a single passenger boards the aircraft. That's what was certified on February 19th, not just a room with screens. The entire operational logic of an aircraft that doesn't fully exist yet in commercial service, replicated, validated, and approved by two of the world's toughest regulators. But there's still something this certification doesn't solve. Here is the uncomfortable arithmetic of where the 777X program stands right now. The simulator is certified. The aircraft is not. The FAA has issued training device qualifications. It has not issued a type certificate for the 777X itself. That process, the actual certification of the airplane, is still underway. Boeing is still working through testing, documentation, and regulatory review. The first production 777X is not expected to fly until April 2026. That's not a delivery flight. That's the first flight of a production standard aircraft, which then has to complete its own validation process before regulators will approve it for passenger service. Boeing's launch customer is targeting delivery in early 2027. That's the plan. But the 777X has missed every major plan it has ever had. And while Boeing has removed one of the biggest operational unknowns by certifying the simulator, the biggest unknown of all, will the aircraft itself receive final certification, remains open. Airlines can now begin building training programs. They can start developing instructor courses, scheduling pilot transitions, and structuring the operational frameworks they'll need when deliveries begin. That work, which would have taken months after certification, can now run in parallel. But parallel preparation only helps if the aircraft arrives on schedule. And for the airlines that have been waiting since 2020, that is not a small if. Consider what Emirates has riding on this: 205 aircraft. At a list price of roughly $450 million per aircraft, that's a theoretical order value approaching $90 billion. Emirates has built its global network around the promise of next-generation efficiency. The 777X was designed to replace aging 777-300 ERS with an aircraft that burns significantly less fuel, carries more passengers, and operates routes that current aircraft handle at the margins of their range every year. The 777X doesn't enter service is a year Emirates operates older aircraft on routes where margins matter. It is a year of higher fuel costs, older cabin products, and deferred competitive advantage. And Emirates is not alone. Qatar Airways, Singapore Airlines, All Nippon Airways, 13 customers across the globe, all with operational plans built around an aircraft that is still being certified. The simulator qualification matters to them not as a headline, but as a signal. It tells them that the training infrastructure will be ready, that when the aircraft is certified, if the timeline holds, they won't face a second bottleneck of needing to qualify pilots before they can take delivery. For airlines, the simulator certification converts waiting into preparation, and after 6 years of waiting, that shift matters more than any press release. There's a broader question sitting underneath all of this that nobody is asking directly. Boeing has spent the better part of a decade under extraordinary pressure. The TSNT MAX crisis, the pandemic, supply chain disruptions, a manufacturing quality scandal that put its production processes under federal scrutiny, 2 CEOs in rapid succession, a workforce navigating uncertainty while trying to build some of the most complex machines human beings have ever engineered. And through all of that, the 777X program kept moving. Slowly, painfully, often invisibly, but moving. The simulator certification is not proof that Boeing has solved its problems. It is not evidence that the cultural and operational challenges that defined the past decade have been overcome. It is one milestone, achieved on one program, announced quietly on a Thursday in February. The FAA signed it, ESA signed it. Two regulators who have spent years subjecting Boeing to heightened scrutiny looked at what was built in Gatwick and said, "This works, that matters," not as vindication, as a data point. In an industry where trust is rebuilt, one approved document at a time, one qualified simulator at a time. One data point is not nothing. So here is where the 777X program stands, as of February 22/6, a certified simulator in Gatwick. A first production flight expected in April, launch customer deliveries. Targeting early 2027, 481 orders. Shenzhen customers. A folding wingtip that has never flown passengers, and a company that has spent 6 years asking the world to wait just a little. Longer. The simulator is ready. The pilots can start training. The aircraft is not yet certified. That this milestone cannot answer. Begin.